Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today, Jesus teaches about serving others, and this is a really, really important lesson, and we really need to learn from this one. Um, there's a lot. This could be, and I'm sure it has been in the past. I know I've taught on it and preached on it. This is could be a series of sermons and lessons that I could go into here, but I try to keep these under 15, 20 minutes. And so we'll just see what we get into with this one. But it is very important lesson that we learn how the kingdom of God works, how the church should work, and how we need to make sure we are as lead, especially if you're a leader in the church, but anyone in the church is going to look at serving. So Jesus is going to teach about serving others. This comes from Matthew 20 verses 20 through 28 and Mark 10 verses 35 through 45. Again, like I typically do, I'm gonna stick in with Matthew on this one. I just like the way he writes and the detail he goes into. But it feel more than free to look into Mark as well. And so we'll start with that. So Matthew 20 verse 20 says, "Then the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus with her sons. She knelt respectfully to ask a favor. 'What is your request?' Jesus asked. She replied, 'In your kingdom, please let my two sons sit in places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left.' And she didn't know what she was asking. And Jesus, really answered her by saying that you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering I am able to drink from?" "Oh, yes," they replied, "we are able." And they had no clue what they were agreeing to. So Jesus told them, he's like, "Okay, you will indeed drink from my bitter cup." He knew what was going to happen to him. "But I have no right to say who will sit on my right or on my left. My Father has prepared those places for the ones who He has chosen." And so He's saying, "Look, this is not my place to decide who's going to be on the left and who's going to be on the right. That is up to God. I have no say in that." And so then the other 10 disciples, right? They hear what James and John had asked, and they were indignant. They were mad. They were upset. They were jealous, right? So Jesus called them all together and he says to them, right? "You know that the rulers in this world lord it over the people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them." We see this a lot in the church, unfortunately, now. But this is how it's supposed to be. "But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be leader among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave." That flips the narrative, the mindset, the worldly mindset, flips it on its head. "For even the Son of Man came not to be served." Right? He could have come and ruled and to be served, but he said no, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. And this is one of the first times he talks about paying the sins, being that ransom for many. And so let's look at the notes for this one, right? The mother of James and John said, she came to Jesus and she knelt respectfully before him. So this is an interesting thing, and we do this, right? We do this in our worship a lot of times. She gave Jesus worship, but her real motive was to get something from him. And so how many of us are coming to worship Jesus, or do you come to Jesus and you're all respectful, but in your motive is to get something from Jesus? Is that your motive, or is it to do his will? And so too often this happens in our churches, it happens in our lives, right? We play these religious games expecting God to give us something in return. It's like, "Oh, well, I do this and you should give me something in return." It's like, no, that's not how it works. True worship of Jesus, true worship of God, however, adores and praises Christ for who he is and what he's done for us, not what we can get out of it. If your thought and your motive behind doing things for Christ or even for others is because you'll get something out of it, then you have the wrong mindset. You completely wrong mindset, and you need to change it. And you need to look at that and take that look in the mirror and say, "What can I do?" You should be serving people to serve people, not because you might get something out of it. And so, we see according to Matthew 27:56 that the mother of James and John, she was actually at the cross when Jesus was crucified. Now, I don't know if this conversation played into it. There's some suggestion that she may have been the sister of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And so we don't know that for sure, but there's some scholars who think that could possibly be the case. And the reason for this is a lot of them think that there was a close family relationship that may have prompted her to make these requests for her sons. Again, we don't know this for sure. There's nothing that's written in. It's kind of theology theory, right? Looking at it, just kind of figure out, see if that's true. But again, there's some reason why she felt comfortable enough to ask that question. James and John and their mother, right? They failed to grasp Jesus's previous teaching on rewards. We've talked about that in Matthew 19:16 through 30. We've talked about it in Matthew 20 yesterday, 1 through 16. I'm sorry, 2 days ago. and they failed to understand the suffering that they would have to face before living in God's glorious kingdom. They failed. They did not realize. I think they still had this mindset of Jesus was going to come and conquer and take over, and so they wanted to be on the left and right hand thrones of power. And God, that's not what His kingdom of God or His kingdom was going to look at. And so the cup that He talks about was the suffering, right? The crucifixion that He was going to face. And we see here that both James and John would face great suffering. James would be put to death for his faith, and John was exiled. We can see that in that he was exiled. And so Jesus was showing here that he was under the authority of God, because they come and they asked him and say, "Hey," he's like, "Look, I can't decide that. He alone is going to make this decision about about leadership, right, in heaven. Who's going to sit on the left? Who's going to right? Right? Those rewards aren't granted as favors, right? Those are for those who have maintained their commitment to Jesus in spite of severe trials. And so, again, it's not even up to Jesus to decide who's going to be on the left and who's going to be on the right. And obviously, so they have this conversation, and obviously the other apostles, right, the other disciples were upset with James and John, for they were trying to leapfrog them and get to the top positions. And so all the disciples, they wanted to be the greatest. They wanted to be at the top. But Jesus was trying to teach them that, to be the greatest person, in God's kingdom, is you're going to have to be the servant of all. And that's truly, right? That's truly, the message that we have to remember here. Authority is given not for self-importance, for ambition or respect, but for useful service to God and His creation. And this is where we've really messed up in the church. And I'll be honest with you, right? We've gotten eldership, pastorship, we've gotten that kind of stuff all wrong, because we look at it as this position of power and authority when it is a position of servantship. And that's where, it's like, what do you mean by that? It is a position not for me to tell you what to do, where to go, or all have to, I've seen a lot of times, I've seen this before, been in this situation where it's like everything had to be approved by the elders, like, or a pastor, right? Everything had to go through this one person or these two people. And it's like, oh, well, we want to do this. Oh, no, you got to get their approval. It's like, we're just going and getting something for a classroom. No, you got to get their approval. It's like, that is not what, when we talk about leadership, eldership, pastorship in the church, that's not what Christ was talking about. Those aren't the kind of things that He was talking about. He was talking about being a spiritual shepherd and guiding you along in that type of way, not being over programs and making the decision for everything and everyone in the church. That was the stuff He fought against and said, no, this is not how it should be. And so Jesus described leadership from a new perspective. Instead of using people, right, which happens a lot, we are to serve them. And Jesus' mission was to serve others and to give His life for others. And so we are to reflect that. So we should be doing the same thing. If you're an elder, if you're a pastor, then you should be serving your people, not trying to tell them what to do. Now, there is some authority, I guess if you want to talk about authority or ability to speak into things, right? As a servant, you're supposed to lead people, guide people, right? To the directions, but it's not you do what I say, and if you don't do what I say, and you have to respect me. That's the problem. I've seen this so many times is we've created these positions where it's like, oh, you can't challenge them. Oh, you can't question them. You can't, what in the world? That's nowhere in the Bible. But, it's like, even if they do something wrong, and we see this a lot, unfortunately, and we're seeing this a lot play out in the public arena, especially with larger churches and more well-known churches, of these people who are just basically they're allowed to do whatever they want, right? If they do something sinful, then it's either ignored by the church or it's swept under the rug. It's actually covered up. And that's, man, we got to stop doing that. If you're in a church, you've got to speak up. You've got to confront. And if you're in a church like that and you see people doing things they shouldn't be doing, especially leaderships, and you confront it and they don't do anything about it, then you need to leave. I'm not trying to be mean, but you shouldn't be under that sort of eldership. Now, I'm not talking about, oh, an elder messed up and sinned. We're all going to sin. But I'm talking about things that disqualify them, right? From being in positions of authority, being in positions of leading the church, serving the church, right? You have this kind of stuff. Then if that's confronted and you see that the wagons are circling and people are just protecting that, even though they're continuing to do things they shouldn't be doing, then you need to get away from that, because that is toxic. And that's not what Christ called us to be. And that's not the church. And so we, if we look here, the new perspective is a real leader has a servant's heart. A servant's leadership appreciates others' worth, right? And they realize that they're not above anyone or any job. They're going to do whatever it takes to serve their people and to serve those in their church that they're responsible for. And so if they see something that needs to be done, they're going to be do it. They don't have to wait to be asked, right? And they're not above anything. They're going to do whatever it takes. And so they're going to take the initiative, and they're going to be a faithful. They're going to serve their people. They're going to see their position as a position of me serving and taking care of the people in my church, in my flock, and that is going to be my goal. Not lording over them, telling them what to do, waiting for them to come to me for everything for approval. So that's not servant leadership. That's not Jesus. That's not Christ-like leadership. That is not good at all. And so we need to make sure we do that. And so finally, Jesus talks about paying a ransom for many, right? A ransom was the price paid to release a slave from bondage. And so Jesus was using that terminology again to talk about how he came to pay that price to release those from us who follow them from the bondage of hell and the bondage of sin. And so Jesus often told his disciples that he was going to have to die, but but here he told them, right? He told them why. He said, look, this is to redeem all people from the bondage of sin and death. And so the disciples thought that as long as Jesus was alive, he could save them. But Jesus never revealed that only his death would save them and the world. And so that was an interesting perspective we see about how he was going to go about saving the world, and he really didn't go into those details with a lot of his apostles. But the main thing of this, right, is human nature. We, like a lot of us, seek positions of power. We want power and we want authority. In God's kingdom, it doesn't work that way, right? You don't seek after power. You don't seek after, authority. If you want to be first in God's kingdom, in the church, then you better be the last. You put yourself last. You put yourself at the bottom, and you serve others. And that is counterintuitive to what we're taught in the world. They're taught in the world, if you're going to be the first, you're going to have to climb the ladder, and you're going to make it to the top, and you've got to be the charge, and you've got to, if it requires you knocking some people down while you're doing it, right? But that's the world. But the way Christ talks about it is no. The way we do it is by serving others. If you want to be on the top, then you go to the bottom and you serve other people. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching and for doing this, paying attention to these lessons. If you haven't had a chance to share these, share them. I hope that they've been helpful for you and maybe be helpful with others. It helps get our message out. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so. Like I always say, we're going to continue to try to produce as much content as we can, and we appreciate those who have subscribed and continue to follow along and support us. But as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.